Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. You know those words we use every day without even thinking twice? Like, seriously, have you ever stopped to think about the wild stories behind them?
All the time. That's kind of my thing.
Well, get ready because today we're going to unlock the secrets of 4 fascinating English words.
Oh, I love secrets.
We'll be using this super interesting piece on the essence of English vocabulary that you sent me.
Right. This should be fun.
You ready to dive in?
I am so ready.
Okay, excellent. So first up, we have gist. You know that feeling when you just need to grasp the main point of something quickly without getting bogged down in all the little details?
Oh, yeah, like just the core idea.
Exactly. That's gist in a nutshell.
It is. And what's really cool is that gist actually comes from the old French word gise,
Oh, wow.
which means to lie or to dwell.
Huh. So the gist is what truly lies at the heart of the matter.
Precisely.
I love it.
And the source even gives this great example. Despite the lengthy report, Maria quickly picked up the gist of the argument. It was all about improving workplace efficiency.
Ah, that's a perfect example. And you know what? The source even provides a clever memory trick for gist.
Do tell.
It's just get the gist.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that one's going to stick with me.
Yeah, short, sweet, to the point, just like the gist.
Yeah.
And just to give you even more options, some synonyms for gist would be like essence, core, substance, or crux.
Okay, I'm writing these down. Now
Mhm.
let's move on to a phrase that honestly always throws me for a loop. Buck up.
I can see why.
It sounds so, I don't know, old-timey. Like something you'd hear in a Western movie.
Yeah, you're right. It does have that Old West feel to it.
But it's supposed to be encouraging, right? Like telling someone to be strong or to face a challenge head on.
That's exactly it. And you know, it's interesting you mentioned Westerns because buck up actually draws a connection to the image of a bucking bronco. Yeah, all that energy and power. It emerged in the 19th century and embodies that same spirit of summoning your inner strength to buck up against whatever you're facing.
I never would have guessed that, but now that you say it, it makes perfect sense. It's like you're telling someone to gather themselves and leap over whatever obstacle is in their way.
Right. And to help you remember it, the Thor suggests picturing a sad buck like a deer being encouraged to perk up and spring into action.
Oh, I love that. It's so vivid.
Isn't it?
And you know, that idea of finding strength amidst difficulty makes me think about those times when we encounter people who seem, well, less than genuine.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, our next word is phony. Have you ever gotten that feeling from someone like they're putting on an act?
Oh, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's precisely what phony captures, that lack of authenticity.
It's like they're hiding behind a mask, trying to project an image that isn't really them.
You got it.
It's funny, though, because the origin of phony is a bit deceptive itself.
Oh, how so?
Well, it comes from phony, which referred to fake gold rings used in scams back in the 19th century.
Wow, so the word itself started out as a trick. That's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, almost like the word is a phony itself. And it makes you wonder if that sense of needing to call out fakery was particularly strong in that era of rapid industrialization and social change.
That's a great point. Like society was becoming more complex, and with that came a need to expose those who weren't being truthful or genuine.
The source actually gives a great example that highlights that idea of deception.
Yeah.
It says, everyone at the party soon realized that the charismatic politician was just a phony spinning tales to win their favor.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, right. But it perfectly illustrates what phony really means.
It does.
And the memory trick they offer is so clever.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a phone with fake reception. It looks like it works, but you can't actually connect to anything.
Brilliant. It captures that sense of something appearing real but lacking substance.
Totally. And of course, there are other words you could use instead of phony, like fake, fraudulent, bogus, or insincere.
All good options. But phony definitely has a certain ring to it.
It does. Okay, ready to move on to our final word.
Absolutely, bring it on.
All right. So, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like someone was pushing you, maybe a little too enthusiastically, to do something? Perhaps something a bit daring or even a little risky. Well, our final word, egg on, captures that feeling perfectly. Like, you know when someone's kind of egging you on to do something you're not quite sure about?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's like they're pushing you outside your comfort zone, but with like a mischievous little grin.
Right. And it's interesting how that idea of pushing someone plays out, because encouragement can be a good thing, but egging someone on feels different. Like there's an underlying motive, maybe even a bit of mischief.
I think you're right. It does go beyond just simple encouragement. There's this sense of deliberate provocation, like they're trying to get a reaction.
And the origin of egon actually reinforces that sense of incitement. It comes from the Old Norse word egja, meaning to incite or urge forward. So that forceful nudge has been baked into the word for centuries.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like the word itself carries that history of pushing boundaries.
And the source gives a really vivid example that captures that intensity. It says, the crowd's cheers served to egg on the daredevil as he prepared for the dangerous stunt.
Ooh, talk about pressure. You can practically feel the energy of the crowd urging him on.
And speaking of visuals, the source offers this fantastic memory trick for egg on. Picture an egg being propelled forward by the wind, urged to keep rolling.
I love that. It perfectly captures that sense of momentum and being pushed beyond your limits.
Right. And to round things out, here are a few other words you could use for egg on. Encourage, spur, provoke, or urge, though egg on definitely has that extra layer of mischievous incitement.
Yeah, it's like encourage with a wink and a nudge.
Exactly. So we've explored these four words, but I'm curious, have any of them particularly resonated with you? Maybe one that you've used before but never really thought about its deeper meaning?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think for me, phony has been really thought-provoking. It's a word we use so casually, but when you dig into its history and connect it to those anxieties about authenticity in a rapidly changing world, it takes on a whole new dimension.
I completely agree. It's like we're peeling back the layers of these words and discovering these hidden
It's
stories.
amazing how language can reflect so much about our culture and values, isn't it?
It really is. And it makes you realize that these words aren't just random tools for communication. They're reflections of who we are as a society.
Exactly. And that's why I think understanding the nuances of vocabulary is so important.
Hmm.
It allows us to communicate more effectively, but it also deepens our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. Okay, so we've covered the meanings and origins of these words, but are there any common mistakes people make when using them? Like, I'm always worried about using a word incorrectly and sounding, well, a bit phony myself.
Haha, I think we've all been there. And even with these seemingly simple words, there are a few subtle traps we can fall into.
Okay, like what?
Well, for instance, with gist, a common mistake is using it when you really mean point or purpose, like saying, the gist of the meeting is to discuss the budget.
So the gist would be more about the core ideas within that budget discussion, not just the topic itself.
Exactly. It's about the essence of the discussion, the underlying message.
Mm.
So you might say, the gist of the budget discussion is that we need to cut costs.
That makes sense. Okay, what about buck up? Are there any situations where it might be inappropriate to use?
Yeah, you definitely have to be careful with that one. Telling someone who's deeply grieving to buck up, for example, could come across as dismissive or insensitive.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes a simple "I'm here for you" is much more appropriate than a peppy phrase.
For sure. And with phony, it's important to remember that while it's crucial to call out behavior that's fake or insincere, using it as a label for a person can be hurtful. It's better to focus on the action or words themselves rather than attacking someone's character.
That's such an important distinction. So instead of saying "you're a phony," you might say "that excuse seems phony."
Exactly. You're addressing the behavior, not the person.
Right.
All right, last but not least, any pitfalls with egg on?
Yeah, fill me in.
Well, sometimes people confuse egging someone on with simply encouraging them. But as we've discussed, egging on has this more forceful, provocative element to it. It's about pushing someone towards an action, often with that hint of mischief or risk involved. You might encourage a friend to join a book club, but you'd egg them on to try karaoke for the first time.
Perfect example. It really drives home the difference. So we've talked about the potential mistakes, but now let's talk about actually using these words in our everyday lives. Any tips for incorporating them naturally into conversation?
I think the key is to start small and just gradually weave them in. Don't force it. Just listen for opportunities where these words would fit organically. Like, for instance, instead of summarizing a long article for a friend, you can say, I'll give you the gist. Or, if a friend needs a little boost of confidence, try buck up instead of the usual cheer up.
And hey, if you're feeling adventurous, you could even egg them on to try something outside their comfort zone.
Exactly. The more you use these words, the more confident you'll become in wielding their subtle shades of meaning.
Uh-huh.
And who knows, you might even inspire others to be more mindful of their own language choices.
Now that's a fantastic thought. It's like we're spreading the love of language one word at a time.
Precisely. And the best part is we've only scratched the surface with these 4 words today. There's a whole universe of fascinating words out there just waiting to be explored.
So, to wrap things up, I want to encourage everyone listening to keep that sense of curiosity alive. Pay attention to the language you encounter, ask questions, and never stop learning.
You never know what amazing stories and connections you might uncover.
That's a wrap for this dip dive. Until next time, happy wordsmithing. It really is amazing, and it makes you realize that words aren't just these like random tools for communication, right?
No, not at all. They're reflections of who we are as a society, how we think, how we see the world.
Exactly. So we've covered the meanings, the origins, even some common mistakes. But now I'm thinking, how do we actually use these words in our everyday lives, without sounding like we're trying too hard?
Right, we don't want to force it.
Yeah, exactly. So any tips for incorporating them naturally, like making them part of our regular vocabulary?
Well, I think the key is to start small. Don't overthink it.
Hmm,
Just listen for those moments where these words would fit in organically. For example, instead of like summarizing a whole article for a friend, you could just say, hey, I'll give you the gist.
perfect.
Or let's say a friend is feeling a little down. Instead of cheer up, try buck up.
Ooh, I like that.
It's got that little extra oomph. And if you're feeling really bold, you could even, egg them on to do something outside their comfort zone.
Yes, love it.
The more you use these words, the more comfortable you'll become with them. And you might even inspire others to be more mindful of their own language, too.
No, that's a beautiful thought. Like we're all on this journey of language discovery
Oh,
together.
exactly. And remember, we've only scratched the surface here. There are so many more fascinating words out there just waiting to be uncovered.
That is so true. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
But before we go, I want to encourage all of you listening to keep exploring. Pay attention to the language you encounter, ask questions, never stop learning. You never know what amazing stories and connections you'll find.
Exactly. Language is a living, breathing thing. There's always something new to discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's a wrap for this episode.
Until next time.
Happy wordsmithing, everyone!